The Buckeyes need to bounce back, of course, but Beaver Stadium will be without fans due to the coronavirus and what would have been, of course, the whiteout game. Penn State coming off the upset loss to Indiana. Here's Buckeyes coach Ryan Day. What's on the line Saturday?
Anytime you play Penn State, there's a lot on the line. There's typically, the team who wins this game puts himself in the driver's seat to be in the conference championship.
At the end of the day, we have a mindset that we're all that we need, and we're going to bring that energy to the field. And we plan to play with energy, and we plan to play with just toughness and just fight.
An opportunity, obviously, to play a very well-respected program in Ohio State, team that we have been as competitive against as anybody in the country, and obviously an opportunity to get a win in the Big Ten.
I believe that every single game is a must-win. We talk about going 1-0 every single week, and last week we didn't do that. From watching on tape, there's nothing that can't be corrected. It's all very small, little mistakes.
Quite the history. In 2016, unranked Penn State upset then number 2 Ohio State after blocking the Buckeyes' 47-yard field goal and then returning it for the game-winning touchdown. However, Ohio State got their revenge the next year when they came back from an 18-point deficit led by J.T. Barrett, who was 13 of 13 in the fourth quarter and threw the game-winning touchdown. And then 2018, Ohio State came back from a double-digit deficit again to beat Penn State. Dwayne Haskins threw for 2 touchdowns in the final 7 minutes. And then last year, second-ranked Ohio State got their 3rd straight win over Penn State that helped lock up the Big Ten East title. J.K. Dobbins did most of the work, rushing for 157 yards and 2 touchdowns. Look, Rod, you heard what Clifford had to say, and he's not wrong, but how much pressure is on Penn State heading into the weekend?
Well, Wendy, there's a lot of pressure on Penn State. They lose this game, and they're done in the Big Ten race. And it's not just the pressure on Penn State. There's a lot of pressure on Sean Clifford. With Brown and with Kane out, he is now the best running back. And in this game, Penn State has to use his legs. And I mean repeatedly, not just in the quarterback run game, but that's where it begins. He's got to make plays on the ground with his legs. Here you see an RPO, good fake, reads it well, and decides to keep the ball, and then he gets down to protect himself. He's going to have to do that, and they've got some quarterback draws, some other things that he will do. And in the passing game, he's got to get out of the pocket. He's great at extending the play. Watch this throw. This is his best throw last week. Great vision, keeps his eyes downfield, makes a great throw there. And look, he's not the most proficient quarterback yet in the pocket. I think he's more comfortable outside the pocket, Lugs. So this is a perfect time to let him extend some plays and to move the pocket to help him, because sitting in the pocket with the quick game is not going to be enough against Ohio State.
Well, when you talk about use his feet to extend plays, move the pocket, and change the launch point, I think that's a perfect recipe for attacking the area that I think is the least athletic of Ohio State's defense, and that's their linebacking core. I think that stood out versus Nebraska a week ago. I know there's a lot of fresh faces, but they didn't seem overly fast, overly athletic. If I'm Penn State on offense, I'm doing exactly what you talked about, but I'm also going to be throwing a lot of formations, a lot of shifts, a lot of personnel groupings, and getting those eyes from those linebackers guessing a little bit so they're just a half a step off the mark. And if Penn State can get their skill people in space underneath, I think that's a matchup that is advantageous for the Nittany Lions.
And again, it would have been the whiteout game. Unfortunately, no fans allowed because of the coronavirus. But this game, Ohio State on the road at Happy Valley, coming up 7:30 Eastern on ABC. And as I mentioned before, it's really our only game this weekend featuring 2 ranked opponents. However, an interesting matchup in the SEC. Let's switch gears. Number 2 Alabama playing host to Mississippi State. And it's actually the first head-to-head meeting between Nick Saban and Mike Leach. While Saban's Crimson Tide are again in the national title hunt, the Bulldogs, losers of 3 straight, are struggling in Leach's first year at the helm. The struggles have led to 6 players leaving the program this week, and 7 have now entered the transfer portal dating back to October 20th. Here is Coach Leach on his team in transition.
I'd be surprised if we don't lose more. I mean, so if it says you're stunned or nervous, I mean, you better brace yourself because we might lose more. So every time that I've been involved with a new program, there's been a certain amount of turnover. I mean, you need guys to buy into what you're doing, and you need guys to buy in, and you need the guys that want to work really hard and play really hard and do it the right way.
Well, Rod, Mike Leach, 100% correct in a lot of ways, but we all know this is a different generation of players that communicate a little bit differently. What do you make of what the coach had to say?
Wendy, Mike, it's a different day now. You can't just push in this, you got to buy in, it's my way or the highway. That doesn't work now. It's different. The coach now, you've got to sell yourself. You got to sell your program. You got to convince players that you're invested in them and their goals and what they want to do and become, and show that you care about them. If you can't do that, you're going to have problems, because we're in a whole new era of players using their voices and having the freedom, more freedom, to leave and go elsewhere. And you really don't want that reputation that you're stuck as an old school guy in this era with recruiting and the like. So, Lugs, I think he's got to understand, and he's got to reach across the aisle, so to speak, to make sure that players know he cares about them, as opposed to it's my way or the highway, because this could get worse before it gets better.
Well, I think it will get worse before it gets better. Clearly not a democracy in Starkville. I'll tell you that right now. I think the one thing that we've got to note here, though, it's not the exception to have attrition or guys run off and things of that nature. But generally, when you have turnover, that occurs during your winter and your spring and your summer conditioning and workout program, where you're figuring out who everybody is, who's going to buy in, especially in the winter conditioning program. Well, you could eliminate all of that. They didn't have that opportunity to try to figure out, all right, who's buying in, as Coach Leach talked about, and maybe who doesn't need to be here or who needs to go in another direction. Now it's happening at the worst time it could possibly happen. And listen, when things aren't going well, this is generally what happens. You have a lot of this start coming out of the woodwork, and it can make your locker room really, really toxic.
Well, as I told you both this morning, it's interesting to me that even Nick Saban told me point blank he's had to adjust the way he communicates and the way he sells his program. And that's at Alabama. He acknowledged, look, times have changed. I've had to change. Mike Leach may have to do a little bit of that himself. But let's talk a little bit about the matchup on the field. Tom, what is intriguing? Obviously, Alabama with the upper hand, but what stands out in terms of the X's and O's?
Well, I'm really curious to see how Alabama is going to decide to defend Mississippi State. Will they be Alabama, or will they take a page out of both Kentucky and Arkansas? You take a look at this clip from Arkansas here. All Arkansas does is rush 3, drop 8 with the intention of taking away all of the intermediate and deep stuff. Don't give up the vertical throw and the explosive play. Force the quarterback to dump it off. Well, defensively, you say, hey, we'll rally up. We'll come up. We'll make that tackle. Look at the following versus Kentucky. They sugar 6 guys up near the line of scrimmage, rush 3, drop 8, take away the intermediate and deep passing game. What happens? You got to check the ball down. Kentucky rallies to the football, tackles, makes the play. Now, why are people choosing to do that? Well, they don't have any real threat of having to defend the run. So it's not as if they're light in the box and can't handle the run when Mississippi State's not attempting to run the football. Until the Bulldogs decide to start handing that thing off repeatedly, you're going to see a light box, you're going to see 8 drop, and you're going to see defenses keep the ball in front of them. And I bet we see more 3-man rush, Rod, out of Alabama this week than we've ever seen, and zone, than we've ever seen from them in years past.
I think that's right. And opponents don't have to worry about the run, because Mike Leach doesn't worry about the run game either. So it fits perfectly in that sense. But look, I'm still focused on Alabama. I am still sick over Jalen Waddle being out. And I want to see how Alabama really approaches its first game without Waddle. It's still the passing attack where they have a chance to really do something. I'm worried about the additional pressure on John Mechie. I think he's got to really step up and become a real threat, because people are going to double Devontae Smith, and they should. But don't forget, we've also seen Slade Bolden step up the last game. He played well, came in, had 6 catches. But it's not a matter of can they win this game with these guys getting settled. It's down the line when you get to the big games when you're going to have Mechie and Bolden really take off the pressure from Thomas and have big games. So I'm watching to see how they come along in this first game without Waddle on the field at all.
So many people have made the point, you don't just plug and play when you have to replace a guy like Waddle. I mean, it's just not that simple. Again, this game, though, 7 o'clock Eastern on ESPN. One thing we know for sure, each and every year, it is all about winning a national title for Dabo Swinney's Clemson Tigers. He's got the quarterback. He's got the wideout. Do they have a weakness, though, that might be exploited? We'll look at that coming up.
Presented by Dr. Pepper.
A scary good matchup on Halloween night as the Buckeyes creep into Happy Valley under a full moon. Get ready for chills on Saturday Night Football.
Let's take a look at our Dr. Pepper Championship Drive Game of the Week preview. Boston College goes on the road. They'll face #1 Clemson and will try to hand the Tigers their first regular season loss since October of 2017. Saturday, noon Eastern on ABC. As for a potential Clemson weakness that opponents could possibly exploit, here's our Bill Connolly.
Alls, but if that ratio shifts just a little and the offense is suffering some 3 and outs, it could spell trouble.
Right, when you draw it up like that, it almost makes it seem easy, and of course it is anything but. That's the reason Clemson hasn't lost a regular season game since 2017. But when you look at this schedule and you see what they have in front of them, are there any hiccups potentially, and what would be the reason why?
Well, it's important that we keep telling ourselves that there's a hiccup out there because, we need to have it interesting. They're good. I am not worried about Clemson. Now, listen, I understand some of the things that are out there. I think their defense is going to get better. They already have 24 sacks on the season. They're averaging 10 tackles for loss a game. But, they've given up some big plays. Syracuse last week, we saw that. But when you look at this schedule, the only team that looks to me like they could present a problem is Notre Dame because of their defense. They could hold things down a little bit, but they aren't explosive enough to really be a problem for Clemson, I don't think. And look, it's hard to bring your A game every single week. And I think that's what people have to hope for, that Clemson doesn't bring its A game. We've seen that a little bit in the past. We saw it with North Carolina last year. But here's the thing. Even when they don't bring their A game, Lugs, they can beat you with their B game. I think this team is destined for the Final Four, if you will, to the playoff, because I think they're that talented, that good, and I think their defense will get better.
Listen, the only way somebody that is beating Clemson, especially somebody that doesn't have equitable personnel to Clemson, is if that team plays their absolute best game they're capable of playing and Clemson does something to help them. Probably multiple things to help them. And I think, seeing Dabo Swinney last week get a bit defensive, I don't blame him. We've all become spoiled. The fan base has become spoiled. The media has become spoiled. We're so conditioned to seeing Clemson make it look easy. And we forget how hard it is just to win one game. Not just 12 games, once. And to have your A game with 18 to 22-year-olds each and every week, it's probably not going to happen every week. And so we got to take a step back sometimes. I mean, you look at some of that stuff Bill Connolly put together. How many layers did he have to peel back to find that? Holy smokes. I mean, you talk about nitpicking now. That might have taken a couple weeks. So, I just think we got to have some perspective with them sometimes.
Well, yeah, I'm as confident about that team as any team out there.
Me too.
Yeah, listen, Clemson has set but they're a victim of their own success in a lot of ways. They have set the bar so incredibly high over these past, 5 or 6 years. It's just been a tremendous run. Listen, I lived through those lean years as a lifelong Clemson fan, so I don't know if we're spoiled. I almost want to say we've earned it, but we'll, we'll leave that for another day. I will tell you this game is at noon Eastern on Saturday. That's Halloween. And Clemson linebacker James Skowski already in the spirit.
This year, I decided to really get into the spirit of Halloween. It may have been the costliest decision I've ever made. My greased up head went to the pumpkin no problem, but I can't get it out.
Try again.
I mean, I could try destroying the pumpkin, but as Coach V and I discovered, any blow to the pumpkin itself could prove fatal to me. At first, I drove myself crazy thinking about all the things I should have done differently. I never should have played that joke on KJ. I never should have hauled out the pumpkin in the first place. Then I realized I was being silly. I mean, the pumpkin should rot off my head in a month or two, right?
Good things come to those who wait. Straight ahead, last weekend it was Indiana pulling off the upset of Penn State. Which team should we put on upset alert this weekend? Tom and Rod actually agree on this one. Stick around, find out who.
When it comes to home gating.
Take a look at this. It will be a monster Halloween weekend. Top 5 ranked teams playing on ESPN networks on Saturday, starting with number 1 Clemson hosting Boston College at noon Eastern. That's on ABC. And ending with 3rd ranked Ohio State at number 18 Penn State, 7:30, also on ABC. Time now for our Wendy's Wake Up, brought to you by Wendy's Breakfast. 4th-ranked Notre Dame takes on Georgia Tech Saturday at 3:30 Eastern on ABC. The Fighting Irish defense could be problematic for the Yellow Jackets, as they have held opponents to under 10 points per game, best in the ACC.
Penn State be on upset alert. Indiana can throw the football and they can score. They have their quarterback, Michael Penix, back this year.
All right, you heard it here.
It comes down to this play. Steps up. Plus Penix. And they're saying he is in. And Indiana pulls this off in overtime.
All right, Rod. Listen, even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes. Okay, we'll get
That's
you
exactly
that.
right.
But if you do it twice, then we're on to something. So who do you have on upset alert this weekend?
Yeah, well, don't count on it, but I'm putting Oklahoma State on upset alert this weekend. Cowboys, great defense. I don't think Texas can just line up and run the ball on them, Lugs, but I do think that Ellinger and Joshua Moore connection in the passing game is a problem. Moore got a little banged up last week, but he's expected to play. And this is a huge game in the Big 12. If Oklahoma State loses, I'm not sure there's a Big 12 team that gets to the playoff.
Hey, listen, man, I'm with you. When ranked in the top 10, Oklahoma State's only 11-7, okay? Texas, Tom Herman since 2015, no coach in college football has a better record as an underdog than Tom Herman. Now, none of those occurred on the road, but let's not let the facts get in the way of a good upset pick, okay? I like Texas here, too. They've got everything to gain, nothing to lose, all the pressure of the conference, and its CFP is on Oklahoma State's shoulders.
Hey,
right,
I'm going to put
Texas,
Florida
since you're
on
our
upset
recruiting
alert,
director.
too, because they've got Missouri.
Florida, too?
They've got Missouri, and Florida's been off for 3 weeks, and they've had this COVID issue. Upset alert for Missouri and Florida as well.
Yeah, Missouri's got a quarterback, too, man.
Well, that's how you cover your bases. Just pick 4 or 5, Rod, and then you're bound to get one right.
She's on to you, Rod.
Listen, Tom, let me ask you about Quinn Ewers, the quarterback prospect, decommitting to Texas. He's the top-ranked quarterback, actually, in this upcoming class. Does that change anything for Texas in their future?
I don't think it's a reflection of Texas. I think it's more of a reflection of the environment we're in right now, the atmosphere. There's too much to be seen and not a lot of time to see it. So I think it's a smart move by the kid.
Isn't that the truth? We'll see you back here tomorrow.